Okay, let's unpack what's really dominating the news right now. Operation Sindoor. Just yesterday, Wednesday, May 7th, 2025, things moved very, very quickly.
Hmm.
We saw airports in Srinagar, Leh, Jammu, major hubs in North India suddenly shut down. Flights grounded, airspace getting rerouted. It all unfolded, well, really fast.
Yeah, it's striking how quickly that impacted everyday life, isn't it? It really underscored the scale of this thing right from the start.
Absolutely. And in this depth dive, we're basically going to get you up to speed on Operation Sindoor, what it was, why it happened, and what the immediate fallout looks like. We're drawing on the latest reports coming in.
Right.
The key thing here, the context, is that this was India's direct response to that just horrific terrorist attack in Pahalgam a couple weeks back.
Exactly. The Indian government has been very clear on that link. They've explicitly stated that the barbarity we saw in Pahalgam on April 22nd was the direct trigger for Operation Sindoor.
Let's just rewind to that attack for a second. April 22nd, 25 Indian nationals and one Nepali citizen were killed.
Hmm.
And in a really brutal way, reports described headshots, close range. It felt like a deliberate act to traumatize families, to really send a message.
And the message seems clear,
Yeah.
strategically. The sources we have point towards undermining that sense of growing normalcy in Kashmir, especially the tourism sector, which has been seeing some real growth lately.
Yeah, damaging that seems to have been a key motive.
Definitely.
And responsibility was claimed by the Resistance Front, TRF. Now, that name might be new to some listeners, but it's vital to understand the connections here.
Right.
Sources strongly suggest they're essentially a front group or an arm of Lashkar-e-Taiba, Let T, a
Yeah.
much more established group,
Hmm.
Let T. And here's something really telling. There are reports suggesting Pakistan actually pressured media outlets to remove mentions of TRF after the attack.
That alleged pressure is quite significant if true. It hints at, well, at least a desire to create distance from the TRF, maybe anticipating the kind of response we just saw.
Which brings us right to Operation Sindoor, launched early hours May 7th. India targeting what it called terrorist infrastructure.
Yes, inside both Pakistan and Pakistan-occupied Jammu and Kashmir, 9 specific locations were reportedly hit.
9 sites. And the Indian Army, in its statements, seemed very careful with its language.
They did. They emphasized it was focused, measured, and, importantly, non-escalatory in its intent.
They specifically said no Pakistani military facilities were targeted.
Correct. And that they exercised, quote, restraint in picking targets and carrying out the strikes.
So the justification was twofold. One, a direct response to Pahalgam,
Mhm.
and two, crucially, intelligence suggesting more attacks were being planned. Imminent threats.
Yes, that was key. Intelligence indicating further impending attacks against India. The government's framing this as exercising its right to respond to deter cross-border terrorism.
That word deterrence seems really central here.
It really does. It suggests Operation Sindoor wasn't just about hitting back for Pahalgam. It was also meant as a clear signal about consequences and to actively disrupt the ability of these groups to operate.
Okay, so let's get into the specifics. Where did these strikes actually happen? Sophia Qureshi gave a briefing, right?
She did. And she highlighted the significance of some targets. She specifically mentioned destroying a terror camp where, allegedly, figures like Ajmal Kasab and David Headley were trained.
Wow, Kasab and Headley. That immediately links this operation to some of the most devastating attacks India's faced in the past.
It adds a powerful symbolic layer, doesn't it? Connecting this current action back to those past traumas. It really underscores the kind of long-running nature of this challenge.
Definitely. Another key target mentioned was the Gulpur terror camp. That's in Kotli.
Yes, Kotley. Roughly 30 kilometers from the line of control, the low sea. It was identified as a major Lashkar-e-Taiba base.
And disturbingly, reports connect that specific camp to previous attacks too.
That's what the reports indicate. Training for terrorists involved in the April 2023 Poonch attack and that June 2024 attack on the bus carrying pilgrims. It suggests these weren't random strikes.
No, aimed at locations with a known history of, well, facilitating violence against India.
And the fact that they could target a camp 30 kilometers from the low sea, it suggests significant intelligence gathering capabilities were involved, pinpointing it, confirming it was active.
Correct. Qureshi also showed videos, apparently, of hits on a place called Mundrake.
Yes, multiple hits shown on Mundrake. And PTI, the Press Trust of India, also reported Bahawalpur and Muridke as targets.
Right, Bahawalpur and Muridke, those are known strongholds, aren't they? Jaish-e-Mohammed in Bahawalpur and Lati in Muridke.
That's correct. Very significant locations for both groups. JIM, of course, has a long history going back to Masood Azhar's release, linked to huge attacks like the Parliament attack, Pulwama.
So targeting these specific places suggests a broader aim, maybe, to degrade the overall infrastructure of both GEM and Lati.
It certainly points that way. An attempt to weaken their capabilities across multiple key locations, not just one camp.
Now, inevitably, there was a response from Pakistan.
Yes. During the night of May 6th, 7th, as the Indian operation was underway, the Indian Army reported what they called arbitrary firing and artillery shelling.
Across the line of control and also the international border further south?
Correct, in Jammu and Kashmir.
Yeah.
And tragically, the initial Indian Army reports said this resulted in 3 civilian deaths on the Indian side.
3 civilians killed. That really underscores the danger, the risk of escalation, even with operations termed non-escalatory.
Absolutely. It highlights the volatility. Civilian lives immediately impacted.
The Indian Army said they responded proportionately to that firing.
And defense sources later suggested the Pakistan Army took casualties in that exchange.
But the awful news for civilians didn't end there, did it? Later reports mentioned more casualties.
Unfortunately, yes. Reports came in later of further civilian deaths and injuries in places like Poonch, Uri, and Rajouri due to continued shelling from Pakistan's side.
The numbers reported for Poonch alone were quite high. 7 dead, 38 injured.
Yes, those were the figures reported later, along with injuries elsewhere. It's just a stark reminder of the terrible human cost when these exchanges happen.
Deeply concerning, those escalating civilian casualties. It raises serious questions about, well, the nature of Pakistan's response and regard for civilian safety. Okay, so shifting to the diplomatic front, India moved quickly there too, briefing other countries.
They did. National Security Advisor Ajit Doval apparently spoke with his U.S. counterpart and also Secretary of State Marco Rubio,
Sharing evidence.
reportedly sharing evidence linking Pakistan-based terrorists to the Pahalgam attack. And interestingly, the Indian embassy in Washington put out a statement almost anticipating denials from Pakistan.
Like predicting Pakistan would deny involvement or maybe claim it was a false flag operation.
Exactly. Based on, as they put it, past patterns. So a very proactive diplomatic effort to frame the narrative internationally.
And domestically within India, what was the reaction?
Well, initially at least, it seemed quite unified politically. Leaders like Arvind Kejriwal, Amit Shah, they both made public statements supporting the armed forces.
Right. And the chief minister in Jammu and Kashmir, Omar Abdullah.
He held a high-level security meeting. The focus there was very much on civilian safety, securing infrastructure within J&K.
So a sort of national consensus, at least initially, on the need for action.
It appeared that way, yes.
Yeah.
Reflecting that widespread concern in India about cross-border attacks.
Okay, finally, let's think about the wider impacts. We mentioned the flight disruptions, already airports closed, airlines avoiding Pakistani airspace. Major inconvenience.
Huge disruption to travel, yes.
But there was an economic hit, too, wasn't there? Pakistan's stock market.
Yes. Reports indicate it dropped significantly, around 6% right after India's military action was confirmed.
A 6% drop, that's quite substantial. It's not just numbers on a screen, is it? That can hit investor confidence.
Absolutely. It can impact economic stability, maybe even influence policy decisions down the line. It certainly raises the question of whether that economic pressure was perhaps a secondary objective or an anticipated consequence for India.
An interesting angle. So just to quickly recap the sequence for everyone listening, we had the brutal Pahalgam attack, late April, followed by India citing intelligence about further planned attacks.
Right.
Then Operation Sindoor launched May 7th, hitting those 9 alleged terror sites in Pakistan and POJK.
Yeah.
And then Pakistan's response across the border, the shelling, which tragically led to more civilian casualties on the Indian side.
That's the chain of events as reported. And the core takeaway, India's stated reason, is accountability for Pahalgam and actively disrupting the means for future attacks. It's about asserting that right to self-defense against cross-border terror.
Right. And that really leaves us with a big question, doesn't it? Something for you, the listener, to think about. What are the potential long-term consequences here for regional stability, which is already so fragile? And what does this kind of targeted military action mean for how counterterrorism might evolve? more broadly.
It's incredibly complex,
Yeah.
so many interconnected factors. There are no easy answers.
Definitely not. We really encourage you to keep following the developments, look at different sources, and think critically about all the different angles and implications involved here.